Okay, hello. Thanks for joining us for this last session of the week. It's the MIPTV and MIPCube wrap. The idea is we've asked 4 industry experts along to give us what they thought were the hottest trends of the past few days. And then, so we're going to go through those trends and then we'll open it up for some questions at the end. So just to introduce everyone first, to my left here is Kate Bulkley, media commentator, and she's moderated some of the biggest panels this week, including the Red Bull one, for example. Lisa Gray from the Feds in Australia. She's a transmedia producer with a special focus on music programs. Louisa Heinrich is a digital design expert and consultant, and she's been particularly involved in MIPCube this year at the competitions, for example. And finally, Abigail Marks, who's Director of Strategy and Operations for OgilvyEntertainment. Thanks very much for joining us all today. I thought I'd start by asking you, just from a sort of personal point of view, how was it for you? Kate.
How was it for me?
Yes.
Ooh. Well, first of all, can I just say congratulations on MIPTV for having 4 women on a panel. I mean, come on. I mean, not that we don't love you, but I mean, you know, I can't remember the last time I had 4 women, even 2 women, even 1 woman on a panel. I don't think I moderated 1 woman this week. So, sorry. How was it for me? Interesting. It's always interesting being down here. I think there's a lot of big trends that we've been talking about for a while, and some of them maybe got a little bit more consolidated this year. I think, I often look at it from kind of the old traditional media perspective, and sort of what are they doing, what are they thinking about, and of course, what you're seeing now is that it's less sort of a divide between the traditional guys and maybe the new guys or the digital guys. You have to not say new media anymore. You have to say digital. There's much more interaction, and they're beginning to realize they have to do this, and they've done a lot of things already. They're still, in terms of the money, it's still in the experimental stage, but we're seeing a lot more interesting, let's say, collaborations and things like that. So, I mean, I can go on, but
But I was thinking from a personal point of view, maybe your highlight was getting that photo with Felix.
Oh, yeah, Felix. Loved Felix. Who saw Felix Baumgartner, the skydiver? I mean, first of all, you run the tape, and even though I've seen it before, I mean, the music and everything, I looked at him when we were in the rehearsal, and I said, Felix, what do you think? He says, I still makes me think, wow. So
what was I doing?
Yeah, even after all that time. And in fact, he talked about how he got sort of nauseous in the suit, and 2 years into the project, he actually thought he wasn't going to be able to do it because he was getting claustrophobia. So it's, it's an interesting thing. But I mean, what an interesting guy he was in terms of what he'd done, and such a consummate professional. I mean, the Red Bull executive guy was really nervous, and Felix was like, just tell me where to go, what I need to do. Absolutely fine. It was great.
Well, he's done something a lot scarier, hasn't he?
That's true.
Than speaking here.
I mean, you're walking out on the grand auditorium stage versus jumping out of the stratosphere.
Yeah, exactly. Lisa, just also on a personal note first, Australia did well.
Australia did very well.
Yeah.
We won the formats, and we won the MIP 360, and we won an Emmy. So go Australia, yay! No, we did very well. Personally for me, I found this conference exciting because I think a lot of the things people have been talking about for a while with transmedia entertainment, interactive, multi-platform, are actually starting to happen, and I think that's really, really exciting. It's not just all in theory, and I think there's some really great case studies that were presented at the conference, and that gives me a lot of faith and confidence about what we can do next. And I'm personally have come from a broadcast background and have moved more into the digital, and so it's really nice, as you were saying, that those worlds are now starting to work more together. So
don't see themselves as rivals as much.
Yeah, exactly. And I think ultimately a lot of the case studies I saw and the case studies I was impressed with are about the ultimate integration and collaboration of them to make entertainment work.
Great. We'll hold that thought. Louisa, what was your sort of personal impression of how things went this week?
Well, what she said and what she said. And I guess one of the things that I've really enjoyed is that in past years, the MIPCube, the digital stuff, has felt really quite isolated sort of off in a corner somewhere from the more traditional stuff. And I think that's worked a lot better this year because there are still a lot of people in the broadcast world who aren't interested in engaging with digital, who still do see it as a rivalry, who still don't understand the mutual benefit that can be had. And I think by being more embedded, actually physically in the same location, we get sort of more people bumping into this stuff. And I think that's important and a really positive move. Yeah. So that's been fun. And I've seen some really interesting work. I've seen some really good products and some really great ideas for content, and that always pleases me.
Great. Abby, what about you? How has your week been on a personal level?
I think it was quite a nice surprise. I think from a little bit of a different perspective, we were spending a lot of time with brands and looking at branded content. And last year we came and presented our white paper on making magic using logic, which is why should we get into brand entertainment for brands? How should we do it for producers? It's a strategic development and assessment model for brand entertainment, because obviously brands want to know what the ROI is, why they're doing branded entertainment. And this year, brands were standing in the front of the stage and saying, come pitch us, we're ready, we've got a content engine, we need to fuel it. And I think that's just so exciting to see that happening from a brand perspective, and I hope that was heard throughout the conference and not just in the brand sessions as well.
So it's been a sort of great leap forward in that sense.
Someone read the paper. It's really good.
So the format of this session is I've asked each of the speakers to come along with an image which they think sums up the big industry trend that
Can
they've
I say
seen
something
here.
first before you go to the image? Or are you going to the images now?
I'm going to show the bingo image first.
Oh,
yeah.
go.
Is that what you were thinking of?
I want
Yeah.
to build on what she said. If you were going to, I didn't want to change. Go ahead.
Okay.
Do bingo. Do bingo.
But there's one I wanted to show first,
You do yours.
which is
Can you tell I'm a moderator? Jeez. Down, girl. Down.
No, we've
Sorry.
got 3 moderators on stage.
Go
actually.
ahead. I'm a speaker.
this is something that Ben, who's just there, came up with. Can we have the first?
There it is.
Which you're all welcome to play. What's the? Could you remind me the URL? It's online, isn't it?
I tried to stick it on the wall, but I got
bingo.crixer.com.
You get a little random card. Every time you hit reload, you get a mostly random card of buzzwords. So if you get a row, someone will give you a prize.
I was gonna say, is this like a competition for us about
Yeah.
how many of these we can use?
And also you can't in question time say
Exactly.
Don't
if I
tempt
say
us.
all of these, what do I get?
no, but in question-
Commercialize, leverage, digital ecosystem.
But in question time you can't say, Lisa, sorry, did you talk about premium content? Just to try and get an extra square.
So if you want to play bingo during this session, buzzword bingo, go for it. It's there. Let's get on to each of our speakers' pictures, though. Firstly, Kate, you chose a picture of.
You going to put that up first? Okay.
There we go. Of
All right, so-
Imagine, which is quite fitting.
Well, I noticed that they were the promoter as well. Obviously they've been all over this conference because they've bought some, sponsorship time. But I did think it was a very interesting product, and because I'm interested in different platforms and different technologies, I thought that I wanted to highlight this because a lot of us who have been watching the United States know what's been going on with Aereo, with the Barry Diller thing that's being sued, and I guess Chase Carey got up at NAB on Monday and said basically, if this doesn't get stopped, I'm going to put Fox behind a paywall. Yeah. And CBS is saying the same thing, and so anyway, so Aereo is like that, and Magin is trying to not be like that, which I think is interesting. And of course, coming out of Sweden, they have a very different approach, yeah? And so their approach is, hey, we want to actually work with the broadcasters. What a concept. And so they've gone to the broadcasters and said, look, we'd like to retransmit your signal. We want to be able to put it on iPads and even on real televisions and blah, blah, blah. And it's going to all be on IP, and we're going to put it through the cloud. And what I like about it is 2 things. One is that they're working with the broadcasters and not trying to basically screw everybody in the value chain, number 1. Number 2, the UI of this thing is absolutely fabulous. If you haven't played with it, please go play with it.
It is great.
It is a fabulous UI. Now, those of us who've been in this industry for a while and covered pay television know that user interfaces can be absolutely dire. I mean,
they're almost unilaterally horrific.
dire, and,
They're
you know,
really eye-bleeding horrors.
dire. And, you know, like in the UK, I'm still, you know, struggling with the Sky UI, you know, the EPG, as we call it, the Electronic Program Guide. Is basically like, anyway, enough said. This one is fantastic. And you can pinch it and bloop it and blah, blah, and all these. Anyway, so I just think that what they do is kind of cool. And I think that it's one of the things we've got to think about is that all of this content, you know, content programming channels, whatever it is going to be on all these different devices. So then I'm talking to the chairman last night, and I said, listen, you know what? You know, you're just trying to target iPads and smartphones. He goes, no. He says, we've got to stop talking about devices. We have to stop talking about devices. Yes, we're doing all those things, but we have to actually stop talking about the different devices. I said, yeah, well, if you talk to Jeffrey Schlesinger at Warner Brothers, because he wants a different piece of money for every device his content is on. He says, yes, that is a problem. So we've still got some, you know, roadblocks in the way, but I think it's a very interesting technology, and it's beautiful, and it works, and it's, you know, as I said, not trying to mess up the value chain. So that's my picture.
And it's simple as well. They have people from Spotify on the team, and I think they've tried to keep a similar ethos, as in you just scan a QR code, and then you control your TV from your smartphone or whatever, and it's the sort of thing you see, and you can imagine your granny doing it, and that's, I think, what we need. But
Sorry? If you don't have a smartphone? No, Granny might not.
There are lots of other ways.
Although my
to do it.
80-year-old
I'm just
mother
saying
now
it's-
has a smartphone, so I don't know. I mean,
Well,
I'm not sure she knows how to Twitter on it or tweet on it, but she can do some things. She knows how to make calls. That's good, yeah. And she can actually shop on it, which is kind of scary. But anyway.
so, but it does make me think of a point that was recurring this week, which is you're mentioning the big core TV companies. Are they? Is there still sort of ostrich syndrome going on, head in the sand? Let's try and ignore this, or is the progress really happening from all of your point of view?
Well, I mean, I just mentioned, you know, Warner Brothers. So, I mean, obviously, the big studios and the people that own content and have rights are still, you know, concerned for obvious reasons about where their content goes. Is it protected? Will they be monetized correctly, et cetera? So there's still lots of that kind of stuff going on, and I think that will continue, and that's all well and good. But they need to, obviously, everyone needs to have a much more open mind about all this because of what I just said. In terms of the other guys, I mean, what I saw this week, I interviewed Tim Hinks on day one, who's the head of Endemol, you know, big, independent, global producer. And he was saying, we know we need to be more digital. You know, he launched the YouTube Fear Factor channel. He's talking now about creating an ecosystem on YouTube, you know, sort of the multi-channel network type stuff, you know, throwing things from Mr. Bean to the Fear Factor. I'm not quite sure how that's going to work, but anyway. In other words, getting them into some kind of universe. And he also talked about being, quote, open for M&A, unquote, which, of course, all the journalists went, what do you mean? Who are you buying? He wouldn't say, but obviously it's going to be somebody digital, it seems to me. So that's interesting. So Endemol's trying to seem to embrace that kind of stuff. And Fremantle in the same way. Fremantle Media also, you know, has reconfigured their whole digital department. Keith Hindle is now running the whole thing, and he's basically saying we've got to integrate everything much better. We have to have digital as part of the conversation from point A. We're launching our own channels. In fact, Fremantle, for the first time, brought down, you know, more of their owned content versus third-party content, which is interesting because that, obviously if they own it, they can control where it goes, which is interesting. So for me, you know, the two big indies doing that kind of stuff was a good sign.
Great.
I also think from a producer's perspective, with a lot of the meetings we had, it's not just talking about the format of the show. It's talking about, it's actually having the conversation sooner rather than later about how you tell your story online, how you tell your story through your handset, how's it all integrated, and talking about audience and engagement and story. Whereas I think for the last couple of years, we come and have all that stuff prepared, but it's like, oh no, we'll just talk about the format. So especially this year, it's been a lot more of an integrated conversation, which has been great. Yeah.
And you're seeing that in your work.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
If I can just add, I mean, it was also with the big, in the grand auditorium, you know, the big creatives, because you mentioned them, we're doing that too. I mean, who do we have? We had Tim Kring, he was talking about, you know, his multi-platform stuff. We had Zucker, you know, the CSI creator, and he was talking about the new thing he did, Cybergeddon, and how, you know, that's all multi-platform. And he actually said, in the keynote, he said, I spend 80% of my time now with technology and brands, and only 20% with what I call my, quote, day job of television. That's interesting. Now, Cybergeddon, of course, was funded by Symantec, I think. Yeah, Symantec, weren't they the ones?
It's Semantic, yeah.
Symantec, okay. So, I mean, that's interesting. And then, of course, the other one was, there was one other big, was it, oh, I know, Stephen Lambert. Stephen Lambert also came, and he's the Wife Swap producer. And he was saying that he's doing a quiz show in a reality format with a big second screen component. So they're all thinking about it from the beginning as opposed to slapping it on, as you said.
And that's a sea change, and it's also, I think one of the things that's happening is technology and the fact that there are so many devices and nobody knows who's looking at what where. I don't actually believe there is such a thing as a second screen. It's whichever screen I happen to be staring. Like right now, that's the only screen, because that's the one I'm looking at right now. There is no second one. There's one in my pocket, but it doesn't exist unless I'm looking at it. So the industry has spent so many years thinking about things in its own terms. So there is this device, I want more money for that device. Just thinking about the same old monetization models, the same old business models, the same old commissioning processes, and what that has been shutting out is the humans on the other end. And I'll talk more about that in a minute, but this idea of before, during, and after, the only thing anybody ever wanted to talk about before was during. How many people are watching this right now? Nobody wanted to talk about what happened before, what happened after, what could have happened around it. Now you're actually starting, I've seen about 4 different presentations that actually had before, during, after. Yay, finally. So yeah, it's heartening. There's still a long way to go there.
Hey,
for sure.
When you hear, like you said, the MIP Formats keynote, Stephen Lambert saying, my next new project is going to be on social media before it's on TV. Wow, that's quite a
But
change.
we also had a brand this week that did that as the start of their campaign. So our Lacta film in Greece launched online before it launched in the theaters and had the largest opening weekend of any movie against Les Mis, against, blanking on a couple, Lincoln. So it grossed over $1 million in Greece and was one of the top rated at the box office. So brands are right there on the learning curve, which I think is quite incredible, and they're not stuck in these old measures of impressions or households. It's really about true engagement across various platforms.
I actually think that branded entertainment is pushing things forward in ways that broadcasters have been afraid to, in some senses. So some of the more inventive formats I've been seeing, or some of the more interesting sort of transmedia stuff, has been commissioned by or executed by brands as opposed to traditional content creators. And I think that's kind of pushing the whole monster forward a bit.
To the point where they don't want to be called branded content anymore, they just want to be called content.
Exactly.
Our keynote speaker.
Exactly right. I mean, the Red Bull
Mentioning
people, if you say to Red Bull branded entertainment, they like slap you. They don't like that. They don't want that term at all. They say, we are a media creator, we are not a branded content creator.
So that's huge in itself. So lots of roles are changing, lots of different ways to work together. I think that ties in with what you wanted to talk about, Lisa.
This is my quirky photo. So I think for me, what this conference showed was that more than ever, you need a diverse skill set to make successful content. So, on stage you'd see teams of people working together that you probably wouldn't have seen working together a couple of years ago. You'd have meetings with not only TV producers, but you'd have it with tech experts, you'd have it with strategists. And then the other part of that is actually the finance models. So you're not only going into meetings now just getting finance independently from networks, but you're also having opportunities with brands. And we saw examples of branded content that worked. Like, I loved that movie idea. I thought that was so clever.
Love in the End by Lacta in Greece.
And what that does is it actually had an audience that was already engaged with it before the feature film, was launched. And I thought that was a fabulous idea. So, yeah.
Sorry the guy's head got chopped off in your picture there. The point...
It's a symbol of running around with your head cut off.
But they're all in it together to make sure.
Including beheading. That's one of the skill sets.
Including beheading.
And the English team did so well in the Olympics, so.
Yeah, so it's lots of different skill sets working together. That's what you're doing as well.
Yeah. And as we were talking about before, that it's great to see MIPCube have a lot of a bigger presence at MIPTV. It's great to have more meetings with digital experts as well as TV makers. But at the same time, it was also good to see the keynotes from the heavyweights, so like the Discovery keynote, that was great, and hearing Ben Stevenson from the BBC talk about his dramas. So I think to the gentleman's point before, who was talking about how phones sometimes you have to be used for just phone conversations, is that there's entertainment for everyone, and sometimes we shouldn't get caught up in the technology. Sometimes the technology is really cool and exciting, but sometimes it's not appropriate. So it's really, it was good to see there was a diverse range of entertainment being explored, even the guy jumping out the Red Bull rocket,
I think that's really true. I mean, if you asked me what my favorite program was, I'm afraid it wouldn't be Cybergeddon. It would be Parade's End, which is, a classic drama, So, I mean, there's still a place for that, I think.
Yeah, but even, Downton Abbey, they've been doing some great things in social media, transmedia, etc. The boundaries are just not so set anymore.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing, though, is that there's always been stuff that happens around the program, right? So before we had Twitter and Facebook and all that stuff, we actually talked to each other,
Yeah.
We stood in the same room and spoke to each other about the thing that I watched last night, and didn't you think that was scary or great or whatever it was. That's what we used to do as humans. And now I think there was a whole period where the technology was such a distraction, and it's not about the technology. Technology is a tool. It's about what we do with it, and I think what's starting to happen with this audience engagement is something that's a really natural human behavior. It's just being enabled by the technology, and now content creators are starting to see that it's an important and good thing to enable, and instead of fighting it, they should be facilitating it. And there's no difference. I mean, it's exactly the same human behavior, talking to each other about the thing that you're going to watch, the thing you have watched, the thing you are watching. It's just you're doing it through these things now, and not face-to-face.
And I think that the barriers to entry have also collapsed because of that same technology. So you can test something, you can take a property out as beta, as a brand, if you're not quite sure about what you're getting into. You don't have to put the huge budgets behind it, and if you have some success, you build an audience, you build momentum, demand, the feedback channel that comes through that. There's so much opportunity to leverage that technology from just a co-production standpoint as well.
I mean, technology has become so accessible, so you reach a much broader, you can engage with a much broader selection of society than you previously could, because
but still get that
technology is
niche.
accessible.
So
Exactly.
it's an engaged mass niche, if you will. It's a larger niche than you would get. Yeah.
It's a larger niche.
I mean, it is. It's really.
It's more targeted, you mean?
It's a deeper niche.
Yeah.
Targeted generalization, no.
It's a new connectivity, isn't it, really?
Is that on the card? Was that on the bingo card?
How did we go?
How are we doing on bingo? I need the bingo card.
Should we talk about the ecosystem? Is that what's next?
Or monetization.
Oh, damn it. We'll get there.
Okay, you were mentioning, I think we can get onto your picture now, Louisa, because of the human aspect which you were just talking about. What do you mean, why did you pick this picture?
Okay, well, first, full disclosure, I didn't actually pick this. Lisa did, because I forgot. But it is a perfect picture for what I'm interested in, and those who've known me for a while won't be surprised to hear me say this is what I care about, is people. And as I just said, I think that people love content. People love telly. They love movies. We all do. We love stories. We love to tell them. We love to watch them. We love to feel like they belong to us. And what I'm finding exciting is that I'm starting to see content creators care about that. So not thinking about audiences as this mass object that we throw stuff at, right? Or Dan Biddle's quote from the other day. Dan Biddle from Twitter said the other day on stage something along the lines of, the audience is no longer a bunch of vegetables waiting to be cultivated, or a bunch of people waiting to be activated, and that's really true. And I think there's a change in the way that the industry is viewing its audiences, and for the first time, really, I believe that they want to engage. I've been saying this for a long time, at least to me. I mean, I've done many projects along those lines. I'm actually starting to believe it now. And then there's stuff like Imagine, which is breaking down all the barriers. So some of the obstacles to actually having great experiences around audiovisual content, some of those barriers are, the fact that your cable operator can subject you to whatever misery of an experience they want to, because you don't have a choice. right? You want HBO, you got to deal with that, and you got to deal with their horrible EPG or Sky or whoever it is, because it was a captive audience, and it's the same kind of thing as before Apple's App Store took off. There were already app stores before that, but there was nothing that was really mass market. And before that, what you had on your phone was predicated on two things: who manufactured it and who your telco was. That was how you got what you got. Whatever they gave you is what you had. The end. And now we can create our own personal ecosystems out of literally whatever we want.
Converged system. Are they converged?
Damn it! Converged
digital
ecosystems.
ecosystem.
Have I done it? All right. I'll keep going. So we can create our own ecosystems. We can choose which of 200 alarm clocks we want, or if we want an alarm clock at all. And I think that has changed the way that we think about engaging with content, with brands, with each other. And I think that change is now feeding back into the broadcast industry. So when I see things like Majin, which basically yanks that monster out of the room, makes it irrelevant, and bypasses it, I think, aha, now we can actually start to make some good stuff happen. And their UI is good. It's still quite basic. And I can see loads of amazing stuff happening on top of that, the same kind of modularity where people are able to do whatever they want to do. So yeah, that's my sort of rambling, long-winded.
But I was going to say it's not just a question of user experience, it's also a question of monetization. That I didn't even say that on purpose. I'm thinking about HBO. You mentioned HBO. The thing that keeps coming up at the moment is, why do I have to pay $100 a month to watch Game of Thrones? Whereas if I'm subscribed to Netflix, I can watch all 13 episodes of House of Cards. If I want to watch them all in one night, I can.
You need to move to Sweden so you can get HBO Go over the top.
And you've got Pivot TV in the U.S. coming out in a few months.
Exactly. Over-the-top players are doing it. And I think, I mean, the reality is, and the numbers have shown, that people are quite happy to pay for content if they feel that the content is reasonably priced and they have a good experience of it. I mean, Spotify is a case in point for that. Look at how, I mean, something like 26% of their worldwide subscriber base are paying customers. These are people paying for content that they could, in theory, torrent for free. Yeah. So I don't think that there's an obstacle of people not wanting to pay for stuff. It's just that they don't want to pay some extortionate price to have a really bad experience around it. Right? Give them a good experience, people will happily give you some money.
I mean, that's what this picture's all about. People are still going to a concert. They're all facing forward. They're looking towards that premium content experience. So there's still a demand for that.
And they paid for it, probably a lot, because it's a concert.
Exactly. Yeah. And so, yeah, it's really nice to see, to be able to believe that this is going to get better.
Is there any other examples apart from Imagine that you saw here this week that illustrate that?
It was the other sort of meme that I've been seeing. It wasn't a specific product, but there seems to be much more of an appetite than ever for non-linear storytelling, for multiple branching narratives around a thing. So, for example, a feature film that also has that has an interactive component or a game or something alongside it, and they're not separate things like they used to be. I mean, in my time at the BBC, I remember the trying to fold together interactive content of any kind with the main linear features was impossible. Nobody wanted to talk to you about it. And so you end up like tacking something on at the end, which is not really particularly great. And I think the fact that we now have a sort of more deeply intertwined process is starting to emerge. I'm seeing a lot of really interesting stuff around non-linearity and different ways of engaging with the story, which also speaks to this, desire for us as audience members to own the stories. The ones we love the best, we feel like belong to us.
To piggyback on that point, I think that experience is the new luxury. People want an immersive experience. It feels like it's custom. That's why I will pay $10 a month for Spotify, where I can customize how the music comes to me. I can see what my friends are listening on a layer over top of what I'm looking at. And with content, if I'm sitting there watching in a linear format in my living room, that's not a premium experience for me. I want a luxury experience where I have someone tweeting about it, where I can kind of have a group of friends talking about the running joke or what they might see on the screen that I might not. So really immersive experiences create that premium content, and that's exactly what the multi-platform programs do.
Exactly.
Can I say something about Tim Kring said something about this, which I thought was interesting. He was talking about, I think the new thing is the Drake equation is his new project.
Series.
That's his new series. Okay, and he was
Project, not series.
series. So I think it's a
Yeah.
project. Yeah.
It's not just a series.
Not just a series,
Sorry.
babe, because it's multi-platform. Anyway, but he says the idea is that you can, that the audience can access all the content all the time, which I thought was interesting. And then he also said, this is a quote, "I don't make TV for an audience anymore. I make it with an audience."
Awesome.
That's Tim Kring.
Well, that's co-creation, but that's, I mean, again, that's what storytelling is in our DNA as humans. I mean, Joe Campbell, my idol, the anthropologist, said stories are how we deal with the fact that we die. The stories are the bits that we leave behind. And so this is so deeply embedded in us. This is why we love movies. It's why they make us cry. It's why even short little narratives can move people to enormous degrees. It's because it's part of us, and the fact that we're now allowed and encouraged to come in, I think, is really kind of awesome.
I think one of the key consistencies in the brand of the year examples, like the Creators Project and the Film and the Renault Project, was that co-creation perspective, was engaging the audience right from the beginning, and then by the end you had a team of people that were really immersed and were part of the story. And and I think, you know, you walk away from a conference like this and you're like, that's definitely part of a successful content experience.
But Tim Kring also said that it's not because everyone's got a pen that they're all Hemingway. So you need curators. It does need to be filtered.
Yeah, you still need to have good people doing stuff. I mean, I think that will shake out. I mean, I think that we've already seen that, you know, even if a brand is involved and they're throwing money at a project, if it's icky content, nobody's going to watch it, right? I mean, they may have spent a lot of money and put it on all kinds of things, but it ain't going to do much if it doesn't sing, right?
If it's not good, people still aren't going to watch it.
So I think that will
if it
filter
sucks,
out.
It sucks. You can market it all you want. Nobody's going to want it. But yeah, I also think that's another. Actually, it's interesting. That's another thing that's different again from last year to this. Is last year there was a lot of the talk I was hearing about nonlinear and transmedia was making the assumption that you had millions of people out there who were just dying to make their own content and make it part of somebody's program, which is insane. Like, and you don't want them to. Have you seen YouTube? I mean, there's some good stuff out there, but my God, I mean, it's, you know, tiny little percentage. So it's also, the thing is that I think that there were some people in the industry who thought that co-creating with users meant that they would have to do less work. Right? So they get a bunch of stuff for free that they can then pump out and monetize. I think people thought that. And that's not the case. And actually...
Well, some people are doing that, by the way,
Yes.
can I just say?
Yes, I know that.
How about all these new quote shows on YouTube about, you know, that just basically curate cool videos or weird videos or cat videos? It's like, how many of these shows are we going to... I mean, sorry.
Yeah, but I mean, is that really a sustainable model for going forward? The thing is that nonlinear is actually more difficult in a lot of ways to produce and to do really well. And the fact that I'm hearing and sensing a lot of traction for that kind of stuff is heartening to me. That people are willing to do the work and that brands are willing to stump up the cash for it.
Well, there was that great example of that won a digital Emmy the other night, the Paul Verhoeven Entertainment Experience. So that's crowdsourced content, but the curator is Paul Verhoeven. So that's the sort of seal of approval, making sure that the rubbish gets chucked out.
Can I say one more thing about monetization? Because I did have an interesting panel on that.
Yep.
There was a guy from Videology, and basically these are guys that kind of, you know, count how many people are seeing stuff on different devices, different platforms all the time. And he was talking about how Nielsen is, I guess just about 6 months ago, launched an online thing that's got a name. What's it called? It's called Online Campaign Ratings. It's about 6 months old.
OCR,
Yeah, OCR. And he's basically, the idea is that they're counting not just what's happening on the TV, but also what's happening on Facebook and Twitter and everything else, and they're pulling it all together. And what this Videology guy was saying was, you know, before, you know, technology was almost a net negative for content creators, because it was sort of like, how do we actually monetize this stuff that's flying all over on these other devices? How do we keep track of it? And what he was saying is we're now getting to a tipping point to be able to really track this and being able to really be able to find out exactly what's going on. And of course, the fact that we're getting the big guys like the Nielsen's, Barb still isn't there, by the way, yet, to actually think about this and putting this all together, is the next really important step. I mean, I'm sure you have views about that too. I mean, if we don't have that, how do we actually track that? Because the big money is still in regular, or whatever you want to call it, television, traditional television. It's still not. The budgets still haven't moved as much as they could, or maybe should, or will, one hopes, because the counting stuff is still happening. But anyway, this guy was sort of saying, I think we're getting to a tipping point now where we can actually start to really understand where audiences are, so we can count them, and we can actually then convince the agencies and the brands that this is where people are.
I also think the more we understand them, the better content we'll make, and the better experiences we'll make.
Yeah, that's that. I was about to say almost exactly that. It's not about just knowing where people are or what they're doing. It's about understanding why they're doing it or not doing it. Why are they behaving in the way that you expect them to or didn't expect them to? Because unless you know why, you have no idea what to do about it. And that will lead to better content, or the right kind of content, or content that's better aligned with the creator or the brand or whatever. That understanding why. And I think that's where new measurements can come in really handy.
And brands have a leg up in that field because they've been studying their target segments as long as they've been offering a product. So I think that might be an area where a brand has an advantage in knowing what their audience wants, knowing when they want it, knowing how they want it, knowing how they're reacting to different products. So
yeah, and they can actually help to drive the rest of the industry forward. It's a nice little symbiosis.
We have to bring all that data together. I mean, I keep hearing this phrase "big data," and it's gotten, oh God, it's like I feel like this is the big wave of data. It's like, so. But it's like in the UK we have Tesco, which is a huge grocery chain, and they have 16 million club card users or something, and they're taking that, and they're also doing online stuff, and they've got the Blinkbox thing, which is their online video thing, and they're tracking that, and they're pulling all this stuff together. So their store purchasing stuff, what people are doing online, and they're going to come up with a very interesting database to find out exactly what people want and how to do it.
It's big data is good, smart data is great. So it's the noise and the signal. It's knowing what's worth listening to and what's worth responding to.
Absolutely right.
Exactly.
I mean, having all the data doesn't mean you know what it means, right? I mean, there have been people doing clickstream collection for as long as I've been in the industry, which is kind of the whole time. This isn't new, right? Gathering data is not a new thing. But just because you have it doesn't mean you know what it means. And I think that's going to be the question.
And tweets don't equal audience either. It's not just
Nor do likes. I mean, I turn into a monkey when I go on Facebook. I almost never use Facebook, but I really do. I turn into a monkey, and it's like every picture I see, like ooh, 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 and I don't actually even like it. It's just, there's a button there, and I gotta click
press it.
I don't know what's wrong with me, but it does. But this is the thing. If you look at like what I've liked on Facebook, or things that I've, starred in my Twitter feed because I wanted to remember it, or because somebody spelled something so hilariously badly, or whatever. Just knowing what I've done doesn't actually tell you anything about what I like, or what I mean, or how I think.
So it's all got to be pulled together and made some sense of. Brands have been doing that for a while, Abby, and thought we could move on to your picture, which is about brands. And
I like that.
Potofgold.com.
I sense this picture is missing a unicorn somewhere.
I was just about to ask where the unicorn was.
Yeah.
I thought there were extra points for color. I mean, I don't know.
There's always extra points for unicorns.
This is actually the bingo prize. Sorry, guys, it's just a picture. So the pot of gold really represents my experience this year in being on one of the MIPTV branded content sessions, which is brands are here, they're ready to play. Sometimes they've already got built-in audiences, like we heard from Renault. So they had this beautiful David Guetta collaboration where they now have an audience. It drove test drives through the roof. They've never seen that kind of performance from a campaign before, and now they need to feed the beast. So they have an engaged audience. They're ready to talk to them, engage with their content. And so Renault is standing up here in the front of the stage saying, producers, broadcasters, if you have an idea, come pitch us. We're ready to listen, and they've got the dollars behind that to spend. So it's really, really a wonderful year to hear that as well.
Did they get mobbed?
Yeah.
Well, you know what was interesting about
Actually,
it?
sorry.
Yeah.
Can I back up 1 second?
Yeah.
They were approached by a lot of producers. I didn't see a lot of broadcasters in the room, and that was the thing that I was really surprised with. I know the broadcasters we've worked with were here in those sessions because we've had quite a learning curve over the past few years. At OgilvyEntertainment, we've been in this business for 7 years, and we've worked with different broadcasters or publishers to help them understand that not every brand is going to walk in and fit into your ad sales model. And it's a difficult lesson, and it takes integration of even their teams between custom content, between ad sales, between editorial, events, et cetera. So it's really cross-platform. But we didn't see as many broadcasters as we would hope. And the ironic part is standing in here, hearing these people say, come talk to us, we're looking for formats, and all the buzz outside the room going on and nobody's listening. So I found that to be a bit ironic.
I actually moderated that one, and what was interesting about it is I actually had the Mr. Renault next to me. And I almost felt when he was doing his presentation that he was almost surprised that there had been all this interest, if you see what I mean. Because you're right, test drives are up. When I then asked him, are sales up? He said, well, actually, no, people didn't actually buy the darn car, the electric car, because it's still kind of a niche.
It's a completely electric car.
It's a completely electric car. It's a very niche, whatever. But what he sort of said was, they've got all these interests. We've got all this interest. So as you say, they've created this audience, but they don't really quite. It's like, now what? They need to do something.
I will say he did a nice job of identifying his KPIs going into that project, knowing they wanted to reach new customers and increase their number of test drives. So I think if sales had been a goal of that, there could have been additional incentives baked into that, whether it was with the dealers. I think there's smarter ways to build it if sales are your final measurement. But in the white paper, it's all about figuring out what you want to get out of it and then how you design a program. So it's a bit different than obviously what the broadcasters or the producers are trying to do here, but if it's...
So he was just trying to create demand that then couldn't be fulfilled.
No, I mean...
I don't mean to second guess you, babe, but he is in the business of selling cars.
But there's a way that you put together an advertising campaign if you're trying to drive sales, and often there's couponing, there's incentives to buy, and I think that this campaign was a big entertainment play with David Guetta, and there was a smart design where they drove people into dealerships, but I don't think there was a really, really targeted sales offer.
And it was
Clearly not. There were no coupons.
No, but there wasn't. It wasn't necessarily the objective. I mean, it's a really new thing. So if they got people doing test drives, that's a win.
It was an experience that everyone was talking about, and that was really important with that target demographic as far as I understood the project. But at home, we're lucky enough to work with a couple of brands, and as we were talking before, what's really exciting about that, as you said before, is the information that comes with that. So when you work out your target demographic and the information that comes with your history working with that target demographic, then you can make some really, really interesting content. So, look forward to what comes from that,
And I think brand and entertainment it's a sophisticated tool if you figure out how to use it for targeted objectives, and sales is not the easiest one. I mean, when you want to get to sales, you prioritize the role of the brand, and that's the last thing that you want to do often in brand and entertainment programs. You want to prioritize entertainment and the audience experience and not necessarily say, hey, buy my car. So it's a balance as well.
But in this picture, the money is for whom? It's for the brands? It's for
I think each coin represents a brand anteing up and saying, we've got money, we would like to talk to producers, we would like to help feed some have content studios. I mean, look at Red Bull, they have 3 sub-production divisions now. They're even more sophisticated than last year. And I think brands, not every brand is going to be a Red Bull, obviously, and that's not their ultimate goal, is to become a media house, but brands know they have a way that they need to target audiences. Their traditional models are not as effective as they have been in the past, and there's a new way to approach the consumer to engage an audience, to collaborate.
How much money are you seeing them actually put into this now? I mean, because that's always been another question. Okay, yes, we have this little thing over here that's doing branded entertainment. Are you seeing that start to switch or not really yet?
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's interesting because they have their own platforms that exist, so they aren't necessarily needing to look for that big distribution plan, but they are putting production dollars in, and it's anywhere from hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars, depending on the brand, depending on what their goals are. And if it's a global campaign, it's even bigger.
And I think one of the things about, and I'm totally stomping all over into your territory, but I was head of strategy for an agency for a long time, and so did a lot of work trying to help clients understand how to engage with their customers. And when you talk about traditional, there's a parallel here. You talk about traditional advertising, traditional messaging that brands do. It's kind of like what traditional broadcasting does. We push something out, and you will sit there and listen to it, and you will like it, and that is the end, because we have told you that this is the way that it is, and that doesn't work anymore. People are like, hey, no, and the fact that brands are waking up to this, and more slowly, traditional broadcasters are waking up to this and understanding that you have to have a two-way conversation, not just a, I will now tell you what you will like and you will like it.
No one likes being told what to do either, you know, at the end of the day. And I think that's why the conversation when you're creating entertainment is really, really important.
Yeah, the idea of knowing what you're trying to accomplish and it being something beyond make it pretty.
And everyone's had but also everyone's had conversations when, you know, you have that moment where you're as passionate about that topic of conversation as the person you're talking to. And that's the synergy of really good entertainment, that you're able to elicit that kind of energy and enthusiasm and get that conversation back and then evolve something more.
I was just going to say that one thing that Tim Hinks said in his keynote was he said, we realize now that 50% of our time, money, has to be spent on the marketing of our content as opposed to just the creation of the content, which is another big kind of mindset, which kind of dovetails with what we're talking about. You know, it's not just about creating content and sticking it out there and hoping the broadcaster's going to market it or whatever. It says we have to get behind it in a different way. We have to create, you know, the Walking Dead, you know, second screen thing or the Twitter thing before or the social media, whatever. I mean, it's a very different mindset for these guys.
There's a story around the story, if you like.
There was, I think it was someone at MIP Formats actually who said you mustn't see brands as an ATM, which I thought was another sign of progress. I can't remember, I'm afraid, if it was a broadcaster or a producer, but are you seeing this mentality change?
Yeah, that's one key point. Last year, I think we had a lot of producers coming to us and saying, I got a great format, your brand's going to fit right in here. And this year, it's like, I got a format, what kind of brands do you think would be interested based on their priorities? So it's starting to shift more towards understanding the brand has an interest in it beyond just, you know, awareness or reach. It's really about what is their messaging, what's their cultural context as well. So the brand has some cultural context, stands for something that we call it the big ideal at Ogilvy. So it's this bigger idea that is the overarching brand positioning that should come through in the entertainment. So it's not just here's a 2-minute advertorial from DuPont. It's here's a message that makes sense throughout the program on BBC World News Horizons. And then here's a 2-minute spot that is also of interest to you because it's what DuPont is doing in this field of energy, food, or protection as well.
I just thought, before we open it up for questions, I'd like to ask you all the same question. What are you most excited about looking forward the next 6 months, and we'll say the next 12 months? What are you really looking forward to, Abby?
Some sleep in the next 24 hours. No.
Amen.
I think it's just a great year for us for brand entertainment, and we are at Ogilvy. We've been extremely busy, not just in New York but globally, as brands need guidance on, you know, how do we start to develop content that is meaningful, that has a long tail. How do we activate cross platforms? So continuing to educate brands, but also help them to produce that content around the world and leverage it for a long runway. So it's a very exciting year, and we're a little busy, but it's very good busy. We're the people with the heads cut off.
Okay, Louisa.
Great experiences. That's what I'm looking forward to. I mean, I think the stars are beginning to align now, where I hope that in the next year we'll start to see a lot more really great experiences around content. So the story around the story, if you like. And I mean, with the combination of technology, platform, and mentality that I'm seeing shifting, I see that as a real possibility. That's what I think is cool.
Great. Sorry about the guys backstage. Lisa.
I think I'm really excited about ideas.
Just starts up when you start. Wait.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I think I'm really excited about things going from being a theory that we all just talk about and are really inspired about that, and actually things that are actually happening, and having these case studies and having these things working. Because I think for a long time in multi-platform entertainment, we've all talked about the potential of it and how exciting it all is, but now we're actually seeing it work. And that's happening because there's people working together that haven't had to work together before, and they're creating new and exciting stuff. So I'm really excited about that, and also excited about brands being more involved in the broadcast experience from a long form perspective. I think some really exciting stuff's going to come out of that too.
It just reminds me of a point we made at our last wrap-up 6 months ago. We were wondering whether people would still be saying transmedia in 6 months' time. Now, and no one's really saying it anymore because it's just what you were saying. This whole sort of the theory of before is the reality of today. You don't even need to say it because everything is multi-platform.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, it's engaging your audience. It's entertaining your audience, and your audience needs to be entertained in different ways. And you tell them a story, or you don't tell them a story. You talk to them about a story, and they share the experience with you. So it's an actuality rather than a theory, which is great.
Me?
Yes.
Two things, I think.
Okay.
One is I'm looking forward to more disruptive models because I think disruptive models are really healthy. So, for example, one of the guys that I interviewed this week was I think it was the president global for Vice Media. And Vice Media is a very interesting company. And they've got 5 channels up now, and they're going to launch 5 more, and they're going to have 10 more. I mean, they're really getting into the YouTube space. And what's interesting about them is that they're doing this deal with HBO, where I think the first show is on tomorrow, I think, that they're going to do. It's sort of a documentary strand on HBO in the US. But they're also launching a news channel on YouTube. Obviously, it's in the cloud news channel. And, for somebody like me, who's obviously a veteran of the news business, their approach to news is quite different than, let's say, the CNNs and MSNBCs and even Fox Newses of the world. And I'll be very interested to see how that goes. I'm a little bit skeptical about it, but on the other hand, it's kind of refreshing because it's a very different approach to news. So I think disruptive models that are going to take some of the traditional players, put some fire under them and sort of shake them up a bit is one thing. And then the second thing I think it's important to talk about, because we did this big, Gordon Brown was here. I don't know if anybody recognized that, but he was here and he was launching this global education initiative, and we had, David Zaslav was up there from Discovery talking about it, and they had this guy from the Books to Read or Rooms to Book, the book.
Room to Read.
Room to Read, thank you, Room to Read. And it was really an interesting thing. And I also talked to some other people about, have you checked out Breaking the Taboo? That's the Sundog Pictures thing with Sam Branson, who's Richard Branson's son. It's all about the legalization of drugs and how that might help change the conversation around that. And I mean, you may not agree with the premise, but the idea is that these kind of things, we can do such positive things in sort of big social questions, big, social economic questions, educating kids. There's 61 million children under the age of 18 who aren't in school, around the gland. So I think that the thing that we've got now in media with all this stuff that we have, all these technologies and platforms and brands getting interested, we have the potential to do some really powerfully positive things. Okay, I think oftentimes in this palette we start thinking about, okay, what's going to sell best? Is it going to be more zombies, more vampires, more Breaking Bad? There's also this ability to do a lot of good, and I think that's a really good message as well, if you see what I mean, because we need some more good in the world.
Great, thank you. Are there any questions from the audience? Please, has anyone won the bingo? By the way, I didn't hear Ben shout.
We didn't get not a single one?
Oh. Please,
if only you would have outsourced that question.
I need to call a friend. So, friend, what word do we need to say?
Well, if you outsource that question,
If I outsource that question,
then I'd still be one short.
damn.
What was your 6 months?
What was mine? I think it's in terms of it relates to what we were talking about before. It's something that happened just before we came down here, which was Game of Thrones season 3, first episode was the most pirated episode ever, and it was downloaded 1 million times from BitTorrent. It had never happened before. It was the most pirated series last year. And the very same day that news came up, so did the news that Game of Thrones Season 4 has been confirmed. And I thought, hold on, this is just completely different from what you hear in the music industry. It's not piracy, it's killing us. And just before that, one of the directors of Game of Thrones said, well, actually, Piracy is not great, of course, but it's creating loads of buzz for us. So I know HBO is a different model, and you have to subscribe and etc. But it just made me wonder: are things sort of really radically changing, and maybe it really is all about access? The guy who was here from Vicky the other day was saying basically distribution is access, and that's...
And access is the new ownership. I mean, that's the increasing trend in all kinds of walks, not just in media, is that access is where it's at, not long-term hoarding of stuff.
Mm.
And that's, I mean, the reality is that with piracy, with BitTorrenting and stuff like that, people would not be stealing it if they did not love it.
Exactly.
It shows that it is, you're doing it right, you just need to make a better experience of getting it to people.
Like Spotify has, or yeah. We do have a question.
Hi, I'm Annika from Dramatify. I just want to comment on the access and Game of Thrones and piracy. I'm from Sweden, and we had a Finnish director who publicly said that the HBO distribution and access in Finland and in Sweden is so bad that he can't watch Game of Thrones. So he go to Pirate Bay and downloads it. He still pays for it, but he says, but that's, I mean, you need to have working infrastructure, and at least in the Nordics, HBO is so bad, it's more or less unwatchable.
So the HBO Go doesn't work, is what you're telling me? Because there's an OTT service in the Nordics called HBO Go.
HBO Nordic, yeah, it doesn't work, no. Unless you have a lot of patience.
Right.
Well, there's also, I mean, I have a similar problem. I live half time in Berlin, which is in Germany, and in Germany they like to dub all movies, which drives me crazy. So if I wish to, I've signed up for, I did this a few weeks ago, I signed up for Love Film in Germany. I used to have a UK account, but I can't stream their UK, the videos from my UK account while I'm in Germany unless I use a proxy server, which is, you know, a bit dodgy legally, but whatever. Not that I would ever do that. But so I went to their...
Proxy what?
I've never, no.
That's got to be in the card.
I signed up for Love Film's German service, and I could not find anything to watch in original version that I had any interest in watching. There were like 5 films that were available in their original language, and none of them, either I'd seen them or I didn't want to. And so I'm literally sat there going, I have money, I'm willing to pay, I would like to watch something, please, and there's no content made available to me. And this is the distribution problem that I'm talking about. This is the experience of getting the content is a nightmare.
Bring on
And
more
until we fix
disruptors.
that-
Do you realize we need another disruptor to disrupt Amazon? I mean, that's what we need.
Hells yeah.
It's like, remember when Slingbox came out? That disrupted everything. We need like whatever the equivalent is to do that.
Yeah.
To
And-
Love Film Amazon.
And that's, yeah, I want to see it too.
I agree.
I have a question both for Kate and Abigail. You mentioned the Vice example. I'm not sure if you saw the piece in the New Yorker last week about Vice. And they're doing something, I'm a journalist, so I'm interested in that. From that point of view, is that they're doing not exactly branded entertainment, but also branded journalism. They've done stories sponsored, I'm not even sure if sponsor is the right word, by North Face. And they were traveled to extreme places, and North Face had editorial input on the stories. Okay, do you see that?
Like I said, as a journalist, it's a little scary.
Yeah, do you see that as a risk? And Abigail, do you see that as an opportunity?
Okay, I'll do the
Pitting us
risk.
against one another.
You want me to do the risk? You do the, okay. So as a journalist hat, I think it is a big risk. In fact, it was funny when I had Andrew Crichton on the stage, you know, up in Estoril. I said, you know, he did this whole presentation, Vice News. It's going to be presented by people who are on the ground, and they're going to be, you know, under 30, and they're not going to have big hair and makeup. They aren't going to be media stars. They're just going to be people that really understand the situation. It's going to be objective. And I thought, oh God, okay. So I said, well, that's great, Andrew. That's cool. So are there going to be any like grown-ups involved in like making sure that it actually is a, you know, fair, balanced, accurate news service?
Just like Fox. Fair
Yeah.
amounts.
Yeah, exactly. And he said, well, I'm not going to defend Fox, by the way, because I won't. But that is the question. The problem is news is always subjective. I mean, an Al Jazeera report is going to be different than a CNN report. Is going to be different than a Fox News report. So, I think there's a place for Vice. But I think, you're right. I mean, it's like this whole intermingling of brands and whatever. I mean, I hadn't heard about that, but I mean the brands and the who these people are. But maybe you let all flowers bloom. But me as a journalist, having worked in I worked at the Wall Street Journal before Murdoch bought it, when we had pretty strict guidelines about what you were allowed to print and how many sources you had to have on the record, blah blah blah. And that kind of stuff is sort of, let's say, getting a little disintermediated in this new world.
I mean, look, I'm going to side with the brands because I work with the brands, but we do our best to make sure there is value coming out of anything that's produced on behalf of brands. So I work with DuPont. We're producing a series of white papers with Fortune magazine in the U.S. leading up to the Fortune Global Forum in Chengdu, China. So this is about food, energy, and protection issues in China and DuPont's point of view, because DuPont is the first foreign-owned company to have a full subsidiary in China. So they've been there for the longest of any American company, and they have a point of view because they've been working in that market. So I think people are adults when they consume that content. They know if it's coming from a brand, that brand has a point of view. Just the same way when I watch Fox News, I know that Bill O'Reilly is yelly and a little loud, but I know that that's his opinion, and I listen to it.
Or
and
very loud.
Yeah. And I consider it in the context of other opinions as well, and I form my own. So. Look, North Face is a great company. They have a lot of expertise in where to go to use their products. So I think, partnering with someone like a Vice is great to go explore and bring that edginess to it. And I want to know where North Face thinks is the best place to ski or to go outdoors and what their equipment, can do and what this extreme sports might be that Vice is bringing to the table. So I think it's really interesting, but you're right, there is that you have to understand the context of, who's talking, and if North Face has editorial input, I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing because they have some of the smartest R&D experts of researching what products I should be using when I ski, and we do work with Vice quite a bit. We've worked with them actually on Hellmann's recently, which is kind of a unique brand to be working with Vice, and they are
interesting.
Yeah.
Mayonnaise and Vice.
Yeah, it's actually really cool.
Actually, you just made that sound okay.
Yeah, exactly. Mayonnaise
in a
and
really
Vice.
bad way.
We use that in sex, drugs, and rock and roll and mayonnaise.
Exactly, mayonnaise and Vice. It has that ring to it. That might be my new band name.
Launched at MIP.
That's going to be my new band name.
Hellmann's is a really just a stoic company. They have a lot of history. It's their 100th anniversary this year, but they wanted to take a little bit of a risk and try something.
A family brand goes into Vice. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, so we had to babysit a little bit, but we were the big boys in the room and making sure the brand was stewarded. But Vice is a really great offering. It's actually partially owned by WPP. Martin Sorrell made that acquisition last year, and so they're a great collaborator, and they have such a fresh point of view for brands and. Especially Hellmann's.
I also think we shouldn't underestimate how savvy the audience is when it comes to seeing these kind of partnerships in the market. Like, it would be a really bad mistake if Vice, was blatantly biased about, something, because we've got social media now, people will talk about it. And so I think that's really, really important to consider, whatever kind of platform.
Yeah, I think, it's called collaborative equity. It's what the brand brings to the table as far as a North Face, knowing their market, knowing where to go to test their products or how to use their products, and then Vice bringing that equity of knowing what the cultural, desire is, cultural need for entertainment or utility, whatever that might be.
I just think you need to have transparency. I really do. And I also think that I know that journalism is struggling. Everybody from Fortune to The Guardian, everybody else is trying to figure out what is the economic model for journalism, and so they're looking to all kinds of things, to fund their future and to make sure that they continue to be there tomorrow. But I still think there needs to be a certain amount of wall. In other words, if we let every story we do be influenced by the brand, I think that that's not necessarily a good thing.
Yeah, and I mean, anything that we do is designated as advertorial, or it's published custom on behalf of DuPont with Fortune commissioned writers that are specific to their custom content group. So we really respect that line, because that's the value for us in partnering with a Fortune or BBC World News. It's that brand, it's the journalism that they bring to the table, and we don't want to diminish that halo at all.
Okay. Oh, last one.
And I have a final question. Hi, I'm Mark from Newcastle. I run a branded entertainment division which was responsible for the Renault example. This is my first time at MIP. I know Ogilvy have been here a long time and do a great job. And the job that I saw Ogilvy do and other people like us in the sessions, the sessions I went to, which were branded entertainment or content related, were all excellent, really, really good, but it seemed to be attended by our own industry to some extent and some producers. But I observed what Abby was talking about earlier about this disconnect between that part of MIP and the rest of what seemed to be going on. There's this buzz out there that was still seen as somewhere slightly outside, even though MIPQ is inside. I want to ask two questions, and partly, I guess, Kate's worry about church and state that might be holding back some broadcasters, but we really need that increased level of involvement and engagement, I think, here at this conference, so that we're not seen as marginalised on an ATM, check payer, etc. Because I think, as lots of people have said, we can add lots of value to how the broadcast and producers actually innovate and drive a new model.
I think.
So, did you get the question?
To what extent? Sorry, I summarised.
No,
to what extent do you welcome brands being more involved in MIP?
Okay.
I think the more examples of what you're talking about exist, then there'll be more involvement. I think that's where it comes from. I think it's still, because as I said, at home we deal with broadcasters, we deal with brands, we deal with agencies, and it's still getting all those kind of relationships, getting the band together is still a fairly new concept, and getting those people all in the same room is new. And I think that's all to do, and the reason why it's not happening more is because not many people are doing it. But we're at a point now with entertainment where we are needing to look for new solutions, and having everyone work together and creating these new pieces of entertainment, I think is the only way to get more people talking outside and within MIPQ. That's my opinion.
I mean, for somebody like me who's been watching this, it's actually, there's been great strides, okay? But you have to remember that, like when I was talking about Fremantle, that, they've only just reorganized their new digital division. They're only just starting to think about baking in stuff at the beginning. They're only just starting to think about, how to get the brands involved and how do we work with them. They're only just beginning to look at not just the broadcaster as the person that they need to pitch to. Do you see what I mean? So there's a lot about what she said, getting the band together. I mean, that is a really good way to look at it. It's, they're not used to working together like this. They're also, so they don't quite know what the sheet music is that they're supposed to be using, and there's still a lot of uncertainty, if you see what I mean. So I think you have to get over that. And something that those of us who've been covering this industry and in the industry for a while have seen a lot of strides. Some of it's going to be generational as well, I might add. All right. So, and I think there are risks, like I said, church and state, but I also think there's a lot of opportunities as well. But I think we just have to make sure things go forward. But I think you shouldn't be discouraged. I think that there actually has been great strides, and that there's been much more interaction with the brands and stuff like that. And putting, as you said, the MIP Cube thing down here, and there was this big brand thing somewhere. I think there was some kind of closed door session. So I mean, there is stuff happening, but more the better.
No? Okay. Well, thanks very much for coming, and hope you enjoyed it. You can...
The end.
You can check out all of our conference videos on youtube.com/MIP Markets, and all the reports of this session and all the other sessions on mipblog.com. So thanks very much, and see you hopefully at MIPCon.
Thank you, James. Thank you.
Thank you, ladies.